Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators, a production of KRWG Broadcasting. Your Legislators is a public service program providing our viewing audience in southern New Mexico the opportunity to hear about important legislative issues directly from their elected representatives in Santa Fe. Here's your host, Sloan Patton.
Well, thanks for being with us. Today with us is Gil Sorg. He's a councilman for District 5 in Las Cruces. Gil, thanks for being with us this morning.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Definitely. Well, so I want to start off by asking you about something that's been in the national news, in the state news, and here locally, and that's the minimum wage law. Tell me, as a councilman, what have you had to deal with on that issue?
Well, it was brought up in our city council meeting earlier in February that some councilors wanted to have a resolution in support of the state bill that Senator Gil Sorg has proposed in the Senate that would raise the minimum wage $1 to $8.50.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided to have some work sessions on it to discuss it and hear all sides of the issue, and so we've been doing that.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the viewpoints that you've been listening to? I mean, it's a complicated issue, of course, but what have you been hearing from Las Cruces?
Oh, I've been hearing a lot. There's a lot of Las Cruces that want the minimum wage higher because of our poverty, because of the great divergence in our wages and income from the lowest to the highest income people in not only here but all across America. And then I've heard from businesses that say this will hurt their businesses, especially the smaller local businesses.
Yeah. And have you taken a sort of a stance on it as a councilman, or are you trying to sort of just take both sides in? Well,
I believe firmly that we have this big income gap in our society and our economy today, and like I said, some people like to call it the great divergence in income in America. And that income gap is between the lowest earners and the highest wage earners or highest income people. There was once a time when that spread was about 20 times. But today it's 500 to 600 times greater income for the highest income people and the lowest. Mm-hmm. And so this is a real problem in our economy all across America today.
And it's interesting because Albuquerque has a higher than the state average, so does Santa Fe. And a lot of people are looking to Las Cruces and they're saying, well, Las Cruces is really the only major city in New Mexico that hasn't increased the minimum wage.
That's right. That's right. There is that difference, and I support something that's on the state level or the national level, better yet. So we're all on a level playing field, so to speak, and so that's what I would like to see: the whole state, or even better yet, the whole country, have a higher wage. Our income discrepancy, or the minimum wage earner today, has a level of income that is much less than it used to be. In 1968, if you have the same minimum wage we had in 1968, the minimum wage would be about $10.55 an hour.
Yeah.
So we're way behind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you look at it another way, a minimum wage has risen, if the minimum wage has risen in step with productivity growth in the last 30 years, the minimum wage should be in the neighborhood of $16.50. So like I said, the discrepancy between the low and high income people is gotten wider and wider.
Mm-hmm. And I know in your district, District 5, there are several businesses along, Baton Memorial Highway, just thinking about them right there. And so how do you deal with the business owners and their perspective of, well, I don't want to have to increase the payroll, I don't want to lose this $50,000, $100,000 a year. How have you answered their questions?
Well, there is something that has been going on in the country in various places. 4 or 5 states have adopted what they call a 2-tier minimum wage, where those small businesses that, or startup businesses even, have a little lower minimum wage. And then as they grow, they have to jump up to the higher minimum wage in those states. Minnesota, Montana, Ohio, Oklahoma, and I believe Nevada also has the same. And so they measure small businesses in different ways. Eureka, California, for example, has a lower minimum wage for those businesses that have less than 25 or 30 employees. And once you get to that stage and go higher, then you have to pay the higher minimum wage in California.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you know, another issue that I know that you've had a lot of dealings with over the last few months, and I guess probably several years, is the Organ Mountains being proposed as a national monument. I understand that you do support that initiative. Well, tell me about, you know, what the process has been like with the Organ Mountains. You know, both sides of seeing both sides and then making a decision on it.
Well, it's just an effort to protect our public lands from disposal or development, and protecting all the resources we have in these places. It's not only the Organ Mountains, but all the other mountains in the county here too, the Robledos, the Potrillos, and so forth, the Las Uvas, for example. And these places have some tremendous resources there. Their biological resources are important. Their cultural and historical resources are very important. There's petroglyphs, there's the historical places like the Butterfield Stagecoach Trail, the World War II bombing sites. These are all located out on the west side of the county, and we want to protect all of those areas from future development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, District 5 out there is almost, you know, it's sort of on the edge. I mean, that part of the county is almost in the backyard of that district, so to speak. Do you hear a lot of your constituents, you know, talking about wanting to have that national park so close to them?
Well, correction, it's not a national park.
Oh, right,
it is
right.
a
Monument.
national
yeah,
monument.
Excuse me, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's a national monument which would be administered by the Bureau of Land Management as
Right.
it is today. And yes, many of my constituents are in favor of this. In fact, surveys have shown is higher than 80% of the people support the national monument in our county.
Okay. And it's interesting because, well, I mean, a lot of people are looking at the other side and they're saying, well, this is such a large part of Doña County. You know, couldn't we somehow make it smaller? Which legislatively, you know, would be tougher to do, you know, to change it. But do you hear any of your constituents saying that they wish that it was a smaller part of the county?
None of my constituents, but other people in the county, of course.
Okay.
I see no rational reason why we would make it smaller. Like I said, these resources that are on these expanded areas in the county are in these other areas that include the larger national monument. And to protect those, that's what we'd have to have. So that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in that part of the county, the District 5, there's been a lot of growth. Do you see you know, development extending beyond it anytime in the near future? You know, in the next 10 or 20 years. I mean, do you see developments being built past the District 5?
No, we have plenty of city of Las Cruces land that can be developed in the next 10, 20 years. Not only in District 5, but in District 6 also, both sides of Highway 70. And so I don't see that kind of a thing, but we want to look to the future of our grandchildren. Who knows, we might have another building explosion, you might say, like we had in 03 to 07, and that is always possible. And so for that reason, that's why we want to protect these lands.
Mm-hmm. And well, back in that first sort of explosion, the '03 to '07, what are some of the things that happened in the county that you remember? You know, were there problems with building permits or developments? What was that period like?
Well, that period, I didn't get involved in too much. I was out of the city doing work from time to time. But what I know happened is that the growth was so fast, it was hard to keep up. And so there was mistakes, or maybe we won't call them mistakes, but anyway, there was things that were done that weren't just right. They weren't really smart things to do. And so what you have is a leapfrog development, where you have subdivisions that are further away from the rest of the city with not enough infrastructure to support them. And that's been the big problem ever since. We have some areas in District 5 as well as District 6 somewhat that have this kind of incomplete infrastructure. And that is something that we're trying to correct right now.
Yeah. What are some of the costs involved that the city has to take on when developments aren't finished like that?
Well, costs that we have to, oh dear, I don't know whether we should do that kind of a cost. I think the developments themselves should be paying for their own infrastructure. That's the way it's designed, but there are loopholes, shall we say, in that development that have allowed them to develop with incomplete infrastructure. Good example is Roadrunner Parkway north of Highway 70. It's partially done, and it has an important arroyo crossing that isn't allowing the residents there to disperse their traffic. They all have to funnel into one or two streets, and so that gives you traffic jams. It gives you more time that you have to travel, as well as the cost of the extra travel time, and more gasoline burned when you drive around. And so this is the thing we want to try to correct now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I remember being at a meeting maybe around the turn of the year where you guys brought up the issue of impact fees. And so that would be a charge on brand new developments that would pay for the infrastructure, you know, up front. And
yes.
So that's, you know, I've heard from around $1,000. I think maybe it might be a percentage based on how much the cost of the house is. But impact fees in Doña County, what do you see happening when that's up for reconsideration? I think it's maybe 3 or 4 months from now.
Yes. We've tasked our city staff and the building industry to come up with ways in which we can complete this infrastructure. And there are different ways. Impact fees is definitely one of them. But the way the impact fees have been presented to the City Council only pays for about 10% of all the arterial roads that are projected to be built in the next 30, 40, 50 years or so. And so somewhere there has to be some makeup, shall we say, to correct that. And so that's what we're struggling with right now. We're trying to come up with ways in which we can plan for the future, so that we don't run into these cases where we have incomplete infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the ideas that have been put forth besides impact fees for paying for the development?
It's still in the infancy stage of re-looking at this, or looking at it again. What we're doing is looking at different ways of doing this. One is to have our standards for infrastructure changed, so that how that we grow is done in a way in which we don't have the incomplete infrastructure. And so by building standards, or our street standards and designs and so forth, that is also looked at right now too as a possibility, but we're still just in the beginning stages of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, our part of the country, a part of the state is interesting. I think they refer to it as the Mesilla Valley, and when you look on a map, it's interesting to see that it's so green, compared to the lighter desert around us. And I understand that you grew up sort of around farming and around agriculture. What is Las Cruces, relationship to the rest of the state as far as that goes, and what do you think it should be?
Well, I like agriculture. I think that's a very important thing. If we can even grow our food, as much food as we can locally, so we don't have to transport the food we get from different places in the country and different places in the world, as much as we can. I prefer that. And then, of course, a vibrant agricultural economy here helps us diversify, so that when one sector of the economy is down, another sector kind of holds us up. And that diversification is very important. On the other hand, we do have a water problem, and you can't grow crops without water, and you can't make pecans without water. And so, due to the fact that we're in this drought situation, it presents many problems, and we need to compromise.
What does compromising mean?
It means we share in the loss of water. Agriculture will have to share some, as well as municipalities. But keep in mind that agriculture uses from 80 to 90% of, or at least 80% of all the water that is used in the valley here. And the city and other local municipalities use the other 10–20%. So if we share equally, that has to be determined how that's done. And then we have, of course, the conflict with other users of the Rio Grande River, and even our aquifer too. It's a complex problem, and we're just getting started on trying to fix it. I hope we can come to compromises that don't have to go to the courts, but certainly we'll end up having some go to the courts in the end. But as much as we can compromise in the meantime, I think that would be great. Cooperation is the key here.
Who are the other users of the Rio Grande?
Actually, the municipal and the agriculture is close to 100%. The other users would be so minor. Take, for example, the cheese factory out at the West Mesa. They use plenty of water too, but that's so small compared to the others.
Yeah, I knew that it was a large ratio, but I had no idea that it was approaching 80 to 90% that's used by agriculture. Do you think that it should ever shift to a 30–70, some sort of percentage like that?
That is going to have to be determined. That's what we're going to be cooperating and meeting about and see if that's going to happen. Like I said, let's hope it rains and snows a lot more.
Yeah.
Even though future predictions are not very bright in that area, and that's what we're going to have to go to. With our climate change that many scientists have predicted, we are going to be a little drier in the future, and maybe a lot drier if we don't do something about our the carbon we're putting into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide.
Well, and the drought has been going on for several years, and we've been hearing reports, we've been doing stories on how the aquifer levels are dropping, month after month, year after year. Where else would the city go for water if the aquifers were used up to a certain point, or would it just take more money to go down deeper?
It would be probably more money to go deeper. That would be our first choice. It's going to raise the cost of water just a little bit on everybody, and so that would be the first choice. It all depends on how much we grow in the future, if we maintain our population roughly the way it is and grow small, I don't believe we have to worry about trying to get water elsewhere. But if for some reason we grow much faster and get much bigger, maybe double our size, then we might be looking at alternative sources of water. And it all depends on how that goes.
Yeah. If that were to happen, I mean, where would some of these places be? I mean, I'm trying to think on a map, just, you know, besides the Rio Grande, where water might be shipped in from or moved from. Elephant Butte or?
What the Utilities Department has been looking at in a very distant future and more of an emergency situation is the Las Uvas Valley. But it's so remote that we aren't really seriously looking at that yet at all. We have a lot of water in our aquifer now, and it will last a very long time, even if we do grow some. And so as long as Texas doesn't take that water, we'll be okay. Mm-hmm. But we'll see how that works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right there we have Texas, of course, our neighbor to the south, and El Paso is a much larger city. What has the city council here, what have been the dealings between this city council and El Paso City Council?
Well, we've always had a very good cooperative relationship with El Paso, and we work out similar problems with the city, not only in water but in many other issues. And I'm very confident that in the future we're going to be able to work with Texas and El Paso to compromise and work on all our issues that we have. We're trying to develop some economic things that will help us grow smartly and not have some problems with dumb growth, I'll call it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've cooperated with El Paso a lot, and we feel they're good friends of ours, and we really would like to keep that good relationship going.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about Las Cruces?
It's hard for me to tell because I've always had a very good feeling about Las Cruces. When I first came here in 1996, early on, and within hours that I came here, it was for a convention, I thought this would be a nice place to live. I always thought that. But I've heard from other places that they think it's a border town with border town type issues, and that's just not true. We are not that way. And so so that's all I've heard, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you've lived a lot of different places in the country, what was it that originally brought you here to Las Cruces?
Originally, it was a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a job. I was a seed company's representative that helped growers grow alfalfa seed, and this company had seed production all the way from Pecos, Texas to Casa Grande, Arizona, and they picked, and potentially it was going to be all the way to Lubbock, but that didn't turn out. But so originally they thought if you want to go to Las Cruces, that would be a good place to be at. So I said, yeah, fine, and so we started looking for a house here and ended up staying.
Yeah, cool. Well, with the seeds in Las Cruces that are being grown here, we talked to some legislators up in Santa Fe about a bill that was, it was quickly introduced, it was quickly taken away, but it was to put labels on any foods that have any GMOs in them. And you know, that's sort of been this big issue lately of GMO seeds, GMO crops. What's your perspective on that, just from working in agriculture, and you know, what do you think about GMOs?
Well, GMOs have really revolutionized agriculture. It has made agriculture use less pesticides, and it has increased production because of that. And I think I think if regulated well, and that's the key thing, anything new that we have to know all the science about that. And we have to know what the downsides and the upsides are, and try to correct the downsides with regulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people have, some people have certain fears about, these foods not being tested enough. Right now, they're not used in too many crops that are grown in and around Las Cruces. There is a farm in between here and El Paso that's owned by Monsanto, and I believe that they use the seeds, but there aren't any chili peppers that use the seeds.
That's right. That's
GMOs.
right.
Yeah. But
not chili, but alfalfa has GMO now. Corn. In fact, and cotton, both corn and cotton. I believe most of the corn and cotton in the valley here that's grown is GMO. I don't believe much of the alfalfa is, though. But there are other crops that haven't gotten to that point where they've used that genetically modified organisms to do something to the crop to make it easier to grow.
Yeah. Well, Gil Sorg, thanks so much for joining us today. We definitely appreciate it. And as always, thank you for joining us. I'm Sloan Patton, and we'll see you again next week.